My name is Patrick Russell, and I am an employee of Wells Fargo's Home Mortgage Division. I am also a former member and organizer for Occupy Minneapolis.
Yeah!
A few days ago, I found out that my friend Nick Espinoza was helping to organize a protest, and unlike other events of the past, that this one would be different, that this one would take place at my doorstep, that this action and gathering offered me a choice and a question. Everyone will have a moment when it's easier to be silent, to keep your head down, to take the money and not cause waves. In very real terms, the question was, how much is your voice worth?
That's right, brother.
Wow.
Every once in a while, I stop and think about my work with the Occupy movement, collecting stories from the participants, hearing about why they came down to Government Plaza in the first place. There are so many people who need our help. This is why, even though I'm an employee, I felt called to speak up, despite the potential consequences. I think of Zoe M., age 19, quote, "I have 1 year's worth of college education. I can't go back because that 1 year has cost me $30,000. I live with 5 other people in a 2-bedroom apartment. My roommate with a $50,000 degree works at Arby's. My education was a lie. It will take me years to pay off my mistake." Bill, quote, "Sometimes we just know. Deep down in our guts, what is right, what the people here stand for is right. Taking care of each other is right. Fighting against needless warfare is right. Food and health care for all is right. How can anyone deny these rights? Search your gut and see what is really true." It goes on and on and on. Prayers and hopes, dreams and fears, the longing of every wild thing left, the heartbeat of a city thumping so loud you can't shut it out. It's Powderhorn and North, churchgoers, immigrants, environmentalists, janitors, veterans, college students, Hmong, Somali, Armenians, thousands of voices begging for a chance, for help, for freedom, for fairness, for justice, for a taste of humanity, trying to break through debt and cubicles, dingy apartments, foreclosures, a vast political and economic machine that comes more and more to mirror the city of the dead and invisible than the land of the free. The largest myth about Occupy is that we did not have a message. Anonymous, quote, "It's very simple. People over profits." It's the promise of our forefathers, the message to immigrants for hundreds of years, the finest desires of what this country could have been and what we can still be. One of my friends is an immigrant, an undocumented worker who fled the Honduran coup in 2004. Instead of the greeting of immigrants of the past, he was detained in a prison that Wells Fargo profits from. I've seen communities racked by poverty, homes foreclosed on to stand vacant like weeping sores in a city sick with the twin diseases of greed and callousness. Bill was right. Sometimes you feel it in your gut. And all across this country we know. It is overwhelming and ever present. Even in those buildings, we know. There are many people in those buildings who are new parents. With Wells Fargo lobbying against Pell Grants, will their children wind up with more or less debt than they have? There are people in those buildings wondering what they'll do for retirement as Social Security is continually undermined by financial institutions, greedy to see us all forced to invest in the volatility of the stock market. The people in those buildings are the same as the people out here, and people anywhere. Any kin of this family, born and gone to dust under the same starry ceiling. They are new parents, single mothers, first-generation college students. I should be clear. The employees of Wells Fargo are not the same as the institution of Wells Fargo. And the institution of Wells Fargo, for having such talent and goodwill at its disposal, can do much more than degrade the fertile soil of Minneapolis which sustains it. I went on a volunteer outing with my team while grappling with the absurdity of how communities right here are impoverished by the business practices of this bank. I watched Wells Fargo replace its styrofoam cups with paper ones while funding some of the worst environmental polluters in history to the tunes of millions of dollars. Watched the celebration of Black History Month on the heels of a discrimination lawsuit from mortgage holders of color in the shadow of for-profit prisons that harken back to the legacy of slavery and racialized forced labor. If this corporation wants to do good in the world, it's time to put its money where its mouth is and replace the hollow slogans with action. It can stand with the 99% or meet its inevitable demise as the policies it puts forward destroy any hope for a future of us all. The property on 2nd Avenue, which was used as a drug den, obviously means little to Wells Fargo, but it means everything to the community that surrounds it. The people of Minneapolis, both customers and employees, must mean little if the hopes of our children and the education to reach their dreams take second place to corporate profits. The communities of Minneapolis must mean nothing if Wells Fargo refuses to discuss principal reduction to help stem the tide of foreclosures while bringing in billions of dollars. Customers, employees, and shareholders have been speaking, and those who steer this institution would do well to listen and listen closely. I am not the only person who feels this way. I am not a disgruntled employee. I have no grudges against anyone as individuals, but against the amorality of the banking industry and the actions of this corporation. Only an insane and cruel economic system would rather see people turned away from full shelters to face the brutal winters of Minnesota alone than house them in unused properties.
Ain't that right?
Only a fundamentally warped institution would lobby against grants for students in an economy that it helped to wreck. Only an inhumane company would incarcerate immigrants seeking a better life and use them as virtual slave labor to manufacture goods for companies like Target and IBM. There is no excuse for this. I am not the only Wells Fargo employee who agrees with these common sense positions. I am not the only Wells Fargo employee who thinks that Brother Ali makes amazing music either.
Shout out to Brother Ali.
And best of all, surprise, surprise, I'm not the only occupier who works in that building. Do not mistake silence for consent. Do not be surprised when we stand forward to speak. It is embarrassing to see that Wells Fargo as an institution has been so unwilling to offer support. But if that's the case, maybe it's time for individuals within Wells Fargo to step forward. I am not ashamed to work here. I am a working American like anyone else. The big banks are working towards a monopoly on finance, but they do not have a monopoly on exploitation. You can find appalling behavior throughout corporate America, but I don't work for those institutions. I work for this one. What I am ashamed of is that it took me this long. When you make policies that affect us, remember this moment. Ask yourself how many other employees of this institution watch and judge. My favorite letter of all from my fellow occupiers is this scrap of paper. It was the answer to my question. It was how much my voice is worth. This piece of paper was able to do something a paycheck cannot. This paper was able to meet my price. Like the message of Occupy, it's simple. Just 3 words. It says, I love you.
Hey!
If you are up against this, you have no chance.